And we're back, ladies and gentlemen, and we're doing, it's COMP305, and it's the winter 2016 semester, and it's week 5, lesson 5, part 1. And I want to do a couple things today. I want to review the requirements for the assignment, which are for assignment 2, the 2D platformer. And so let's take a look at that really quickly. Again, if you want to look at that up on eCentennial, right, it's there. Again, it's due Friday, February the 26th, 2016 at midnight. So it's a couple weeks out after you come back from break. That's when it's due. I gave you this like little tutorial that you can go to start learning about 2D. It's kind of an older one. Let me just like pull that out for a second so you can see it. It kind of says creating a basic platformer game. So if you actually watch this tutorial, there's several parts, and it talks about most of the stuff that we're going to be talking about: how to create an enemy, how to spawn platforms. Please, whatever I'd ask you to do. Last year, I had this crazy amount of people who copied this tutorial exactly, right? Where you had a platform. In this tutorial, you jump on the platform, and it kind of goes away. It kind of starts sinking away. Please don't do that. It's like, the tutorial's a tutorial. Please don't copy everything from the tutorial and use it in your own game. I'm just telling you in advance because people tend to do that. They see something, they're like, okay, I'm going to have all my platforms sync away, right? So it makes it so it's a very unfun type of game, right? You can have a platform sync away as one of them. Maybe one of your platforms can do what they're showing you in the tutorial. That's okay. But don't make it every single one. That's like, it's ridiculous, unplayable, right? So, and you'll see, like, it's fun the way he did it and the way he explains this in the tutorial, but it's not something that you want to do. And here's the platform tutorial fall. So they actually give you the code and everything else to make sure that it all works out. Some of this code you'd have to upgrade if you're using the latest version of Unity, which we know just got updated again. And it talks about how to pick up coins and how to reset everything, and all the code is here, which is really, really good. So please, from a basic perspective, and again, this is from Unity 4.6 and up. So if you're using the machine in front of you here at the school, that would probably work as well. And or if you don't have access to Unity 5 for whatever reason. So this is a great little place to look at it. And there's tons of other tutorials on Unity, which I highly encourage you to do. But this, if you don't do this, then you might miss out. I'm going to cover the basics, and I'll try and cover a lot of this, just like I did with a mail pilot example, right? But there's going to be pieces that I won't be able to cover just from a time perspective. And some of that is you going and checking it out and trying to figure it out, right? So that's, the tutorial I'm giving you as extra resources, pointing to that tutorial as extra resources. Okay. You will create your own 2D platformer game, and the game must include enemies for the player to avoid and or destroy. Again, it's just avoidance. You don't have to fire bullets. People like to put bullets in the game for whatever reason. That's fine. Or knives. I don't know. They want to kill the enemy. You don't have to kill the enemy. You can avoid the enemy and still get points, right? There's still ways of doing that. You could also make it so that the game has a bunch of traps. So if you fall into a pit trap, then that's the enemy, right? So instead of making people coming at you, you can make it Indiana Jones style, where you kind of go into the temple to try and find stuff, or some kind of cave for treasure, and then you have to avoid the traps. Like jump over the traps, go over a bridge before it breaks and the lava kills you. Lots of stuff you can do without enemies, right? And you can still get points if you reach a certain milestone. So if you get to a certain point in the game, as you cross an invisible collider, you can give the player points, right? It's just tricks, how you think about it in your mind, right? Okay, so that's one way. I'm just giving you some ideas here. You must use your own graphic and sound assets, not the assets included with the 2D platformer tutorial, and not the assets that I'm going to give you, right, in our little tutorials. So you can download stuff from the asset store. You can use other people. Try and make your own assets if you can, or use other people. Don't all use the same platformer assets. Like we've seen that before in the past, where people use the exact same ones. If your friend is using the assets and you like it, please don't use it. Use someone else's. Like, don't everyone hand me the same stuff. It'd be really hard. This is an individual assignment. It's something that you have to do on your own. So it's not something that you and your friend will share anyway. So please do it on your own. Okay, a gameplay screen where the game occurs, right? Player control of an avatar. It's very similar to what we did last time. And then the reason why I'm coding the game this way is so that way you know the pattern, right? I want you to follow the same kind of patterns. We're still going to build a scoring system. Damn, you could lift that scoring system we built for your other game and put it into this one and get some free points, right? Because it's exactly the same, right, in terms of the way I'm asking you to score. You have to have a scoring system, and you're going to see how collisions and how we do scoring in this game is a little different, but it's just a matter of how you make the game. One thing that I'd like to ask you to do is, even though I say a gameplay screen where the game occurs, please don't make one screen. Like, you know, a platformer can have a long screen that you're going to walk towards, you know, over time, and you're going to follow the player, you know, with a camera. So the camera is going to follow the player as he moves across the screen, and it's going to move across the game world, right? That's what's going to happen with a 2D platformer. So people don't know what a 2D platformer is. So if I was going to look it up, you know, and I think this is some of the stuff we need to do because we've never seen it before. If I go 2D platformer, it's like typing into Google to show you what it looks like. Let's look at some images first, right? So there's an image, some images. So you have this idea of, and this is just random, I'm putting up here. So you have a background, and you have some kind of character, and then the character typically can move, either running, and jump. Jumping is the big one, or climb. Those are the second one. The three things that usually they can do is a climb, a jump, and a run, right? Those kind of things, right? And also other things like, you know, have different kinds. So we're going to cover animation in this segment a little bit, right? Some 2D animation. We're going to talk about how to do that with the built-in mechanism system that's built into Unity. We'll talk about that, because usually the player animates. So here's an example of this player. He's jumping, right? Notice that he looks different than here, right? Here he's in an idle state maybe, and here he's in a jump state. We'll talk about the difference between an idle state and a jump state, and how you can have multiple little clips of animation that you can create in different states, all right? So again, lots of stuff to cover in this one. Again, you see that how the scoring system is laid out, maybe a little bit differently. But the thing is, with any kind of platformer, and I'm just picking just random ones here. This is some classic idea of a platformer. You notice it doesn't end here. If you keep on scrolling this way to the right or even to the left, the background will move and scroll along with the player in order for you to feel like, until he gets to the end somehow, or she gets to the end. I have never seen a platformer typically that's any good anyway, that only has a platform in one screen. It's usually a couple screens or 3 screens. You know, just like we have in MailPilot, we have a long background, maybe 3 screens wide or 3 screens high. You know, as an example, you have to go somewhere, and usually the level has a goal. What do you want to reach? Maybe the door. You want to do something in the goal. You know, get the treasure, whatever, to basically finish the game, finish that level. And that's what I'm going to ask you to do. Make sure that the goal, the level you're building, because all we're doing is building levels, right? Make sure that the level has a goal. And I haven't really put that in the assignments, but that's what I'm going to be looking for. So building a game, a platformer, the stuff I'm going to teach you, I'm telling you, I'm going to look for a goal for the game. What's the goal of your level? If the level doesn't have a goal, then it's going to be, you're going to lose marks on UI and other interactions, okay? I'm just letting you know in advance. Okay, so let's take a look at some, if we can see a video, we might be able to see a video on what a 2D platformer looks like, maybe. But I think the best thing to do maybe is just try and look at some past examples of work. So I'm going to look at Unity here, and to show you what it's looking like. So I'm going to pull up my Unity. Again, I'm using Unity version 5.31. I know 5.32 has come out. I would caution you against early upgrading, especially in mid-semester like we're doing right now. Some people are, you know, they want to kind of upgrade as soon as possible, right? Because it happens, right? Sorry, I'm just looking at one guy who will already upgraded. Anyways, that's good, that's fine, but just FYI, it may break. There might be some breaking changes, something that comes out that doesn't work for stuff I'm going to show you, right? So that's kind of an issue. So we'll talk about that. The other thing is, I did an addendum video. Who looked at my addendum video for how to do some of the stuff we talked about? I kind of put out a video and said, you know, hey, by the way, guys, this is the fix to the level using the scene manager. I did this little video. It was like video 5 of last week. I did 4 videos in class. I did one video that I just put it up there, and I said, here's an addendum video, video 5. Yeah, you saw it, right? Yeah, and I put it up there because, you know, application.load level is deprecated. We talked about this last time. So I kind of put together a video about how to use the scene manager and all that kind of stuff. So please, if you haven't had a chance to look at it, take a look at that video for how to do scenes, because we're going to do multiple scenes eventually, right? More than one scene. Right now, we're just focusing on one, right? Because the UI, there's just so many things to cover, right? So let me open up this. I'm going to open up some examples. I'm going to go into my courses and just to show you a couple things that from last semester that we did. And I think this is kind of good. And if I see some really cool things from you guys, I'm going to bring them in as well, right? So there's platformer samples from last semester. I'm just going to pick a random one, so to see which ones that they have here. Fur versus flowers. Okay, cool. Let's pick that one. Just say, I don't know. I'm picking a random one. That kind of looks cool. So everyone's got their, the different ways of doing things, and it's just you take it into whatever way you want to take it. So here's fur versus flowers. Don't know what this is. Or this is one by, I think it was Jonathan that did this one last semester. Right, so we got some background music. Notice that I didn't ask for background music, right? So I can jump, right? And then he got hurt there, right? And then here's the platform. So this is a platform, right? Platform means you have a bunch of platforms. You have a jump, right? And then maybe I can get over here, and then you can see how it's more than one screen, right? But there's not just one screen that you look at. Oh, I'm gonna die here, right? What's missing in this one? Score is missing, right? And the reason why I'm showing you this is because some of the elements are really good here, right? This is what he did really well. Some things that were missing was this, right? So lots of nice background music. But does it really accomplish what I wanted to do? No, right? So kind of neat. Notice how there's a bunch of stuff that he's added in here as prefabs. He's got a bunch of prefabs. He made some clouds, a ground, and some sparkle that he did for some of his animation in his background, right? So that was pretty cool. Let's open up another project. I want to give you guys some ideas. That's why I'm getting you to do this stuff, to look at some of this stuff, right? Because it's important to kind of look at it. Little Spy, here's one. This is kind of cool. I won't do all of them because there's some really good ones, but oh, maybe I have to go in here. How about that? Open. And again, I have the example external document too. And those are the things I'd like to show you, the external documents. Some people don't know what to do for an external document. And there's some really good ones that I kind of saved, and I said, like, this is a good example of an external document. Okay, so here's something cool. So you've got your scene here, right, as an example, and let's play this thing so you can see it. Okay, notice it again. Okay, wait, whoa. Let's make it so that it's maximized on play here. Let's do that. All right, so let's take a look. Notice that we've got the monster that's coming towards you, right? Dies. Right, as soon as you get hit, it dies, right? So that was the animation. But the game over scene, right? That plays, right? Thanks for playing. So that was kind of like, the thing. Now, did I ask for a game over scene? No, but right? He died anyway. It's like I hit him, right? See. But I'm just showing you, like it's not when you kind of come to making this thing right here it is, right? So right, obviously he can do a double jump. Oh, he landed in the spikes. Got it. I keep dying here. But the idea is, like, you see that what's happening. So if I was to look at the scene, right? Notice that the scene is quite big. It's kind of like, here's what you see right now. There's the camera piece, and then as you go, you get to this point here, and it has the level. Look how long it is. It's quite long, right? That's the level, right? So as you move from one platform to the other until you get to a certain place, right? So this is kind of important ways of doing stuff. And each of these enemies are kind of outlined. You can see the enemies walk back and forth. There's different patterns for coins and so on. If I can actually play the game, I would show you it. I'm just not good at it, right? But that's the way. And you have to play this game a couple times. Okay, one more time, just because I'll try this out before. See, I'll probably die again. Okay, I survived. Here's the other thing. See how he's stuck on this thing on the wall, right? He's going to land on an invisible platform. He's going to land at an invisible. When he falls down a certain point, the way you can kill your guy is he's going to land somewhere that's invisible, right? So he hits an invisible barrier, something that's not visible to us, right? And once he hits that barrier, game, he dies and you lose a level. Now this guy only has one life, right? But it doesn't mean that you can't have more than one life. I mean, this is just the way he built it. One more, and then we'll stop, okay? Because I want to show you just a couple of them to give you the different ideas of people, the way people thought, right? And again, you can see some of the stuff if you were to look at some ideas for stuff, skeleton death trap. And here's Jay's. What was Jay's again? Jay's is pretty cool. And again, I kind of keep kind of some of the ones that, we'll just take this one. Let's see what this one is. Y runner. Yay. So again, this is just, I want you to think about this. If you're going to make a platformer, VS Code update. No. Okay, cool. So this is neat. Actually, this is one of the best ones I've seen. I just picked it randomly too. Notice how you've got a bit of a start screen. So now you've got some scenes. This person built a couple things, an intro scene and a main play scene. So a couple scenes here. This is the intro scene, obviously. Let's play this thing and see what happens, right? So, okay, let's try this again. Maximize on play. So now this is not something I would have liked. He used my, this is the graphic that I'm going to give you guys, and I'm asking you not to do it. So again, loss in one way, gain in something else, right? Whoa. Let's try that again. This is neat because it gives you kind of a chance to, and I notice how there's a bit of off. We're off here in terms of coin, but this game actually, I'll tell you right now, turned into a full-blown project for next time. See how the character's being pushed into the scene? If I just sat there and see how it keeps going on the back end, that's bad too, right? So if I just click and I just don't do anything, right? It should fall, right? The idea is that this thing is scrolling for you, and this was a challenge for when I was talking to the guys that made this one, or the guy that made this one. The challenge on this one was that he's pushing the player, he's making the player go. I don't recommend this style. It's more challenging. Now you see those kind of games out there, right, where they push you to go. If you don't make it, you're dead, right? But I don't recommend that. I think it's easier for you to move the camera along with the player. So when the player moves, the camera moves with them, right? So the whole scene moves. Whatever the player is watching moves with the player. Now there's some challenges here with the player moving, right? The camera moving with the player. In that, if the player moves above the platform, you can't see the platform anymore. So you have to kind of, there's some, a little bit of tricks involved in how to position the camera properly so that when you jump up, you still see the platform. It doesn't jump completely up with the character, and those kind of things. Okay, so just some examples of some past work from last year. And I want to get back to this for a second. So again, internal documentation, like we talked about last time, that we want to kind of put some comments and so on. Your external documentation is a little bit more extensive. I'm just asking for some, or very similar to what I asked you before. So please, if you have this one from first assignment, you just have to modify it for second assignment. Like, I mean, it doesn't have to be completely different. I still want your logo. You're still going to get half a mark for it, I'm paying you again for the same logo just to make it again. Just put it on the bloody thing, right? The assignment. GitHub for best practices, and there's some updates here, like empower the computer-controlled enemies to fire bullets, include a final boss monster, same kind of idea, right? Add a cool soundtrack. One thing I'd like to do is take a look at a couple of the external documents from last semester, because I want you to see those as well. I want you to see ones that are meh, they're okay, and ones that are okay. That's a nicer one than before, right? So we'll go to submissions again. So let's take a look at one of those for the platformer, and I think we saw one when I went. Was it Little Spy? I think I did. Here's Little Spy's documentation, right? So let's take a look at this one. So here's his documentation from last day, right? So Kevin was the one that did this one, right? So we got to give him props, right, on the video, because I told him that I would be using this thing. Okay, so we got our table of contents. Some people are confused with the table of contents. That's what it is. It's just, seriously, I had a question. What's a table of contents? It's this. It's like kind of a list of what's in your document, right? Your final version, Little Spy. Was this person? Now I'm asking you, and nothing against Kevin. Do you think this is good enough for a version history? What should you have put here instead? Right? You could have put like versions of each of your things, or a snapshot of your GitHub, right? Put a snapshot of your commits here, right? That's a great thing to show kind of a version history, right? And maybe a link over here to GitHub. Like say, here's my GitHub link, right? And here's all my commits. This is kind of a commit history, a snapshot of my commit history, which is kind of what we do these days, right? To make it quick. Some people write it out. Hey, look, see this? This is the body of your video game document. Should we have this in there? How come? It's this in square brackets. It means replace. don't leave it in there, right? It means this is direction on what to do. Now he filled in some of this, game overview, gameplay mechanics, his controls. This is nice, right? So what he's done here, he's actually done a little interface sketch of what the player is going to look like and stuff. Is it complete? No, but he started. This is a pretty good start. I don't think this is exactly what I'm looking for, but he's tried to put in a little interface sketch of what his game is going to look like. His game world, his levels, his characters, and his scripts. Notice that he's not, it's not, and is this a perfect document that I'm going to give 100% for? No, there's some stuff missing. Screenshots are missing, a bunch of stuff missing, right? And notice how there's a, I don't know what the square bracket is here, right? The square bracket shouldn't be here, right? Get rid of the square brackets, people, right? So that's not a great example. Let's take a look at other ones. I'm showing you this because I want you to be more prepared, so that way, you know, you don't feel that you're that I'm being rough on you when you do your external document, because external document is part of your mark, right? So here's Jay Clipperton. He did one. So hopping 2D action. This is what's this games. He came up with his own logo, right? And here's his table of contents, a little bit nicer. This is what we normally would see in a regular table of contents, right? And then we have his version history. And what he did was he translated his commits as an example into version numbers. So you start off with version 0001, which is initial commit, and then 02, and so on. And he created, you know, version 0.1. So he's really, really, truly in beta, his initial version of the game, right? So that was like, and he showed you the time frame. So October 24th, and by the time he was done in a couple days, October 26th, he was over, right? So that's more of a nicer level. So much nicer document. Look what he's done. He's taken my document and added some additional fonts to make it his own. This is his document now. It's not my little document that I gave you, right? And this is a little interface sketch he made. So here's the game. This is what his game is about. And he talks about where his lives and health and everything else are, and talks about pickups placed in singles or stacks, square, floating platforms, enemies bound to platforms, and so on. He talked about his resolution being 800 by 600, a bunch of different things. Here's another screen. Here's his gameplay states. And he used what we call an asset from the asset store, right? And then a game over. He talked about his player, what they look like, what does the slimies look like, right? You know, what the scoring looks like, what is sound index, where that comes from, what the wave files are, and so on. Here's his art multimedia index in a nice little table, right? Which is, and all the tiles that he used for his game, right, and so on. Items, his enemy sprite sheet. This is where this is, right? And so on, and also detailed some things like future features that he would add in the game. So let's compare the two documents. Which one do you think is going to get higher marks? I'm giving you these two things because in the past people have said, Tom, I've never seen a game design document, so I don't know what you mean, right? I'm showing you this is a better example, and it's being recorded. So you can always look back and go, hey, that's pretty cool. I want to do my game more like this, right? Notice the one things that I would say that he's missing, if I was going to say that to kind of, I mean, he's got a screenshot. So here's his kind of his interface sketch. I would have liked to see a couple more sketches here. This is kind of a very high level interface of what happens when the game play, like actually showing some arrows about how the player jumps and some more mechanics here. So maybe one more screenshot of this showing how what the player can do, right? And these are his actual screenshots. Like he's actually clipped the screen. This is from the actual game, what the actual game looks like here, right? So maybe one more of these would be nicer if you were going to go one step higher from a perfect perspective to get you that perfect external document. Why do we do external documents? Because we want to explain to the world what our game is about before we actually make the game, right? And sometimes when we go into a game jam or something like that, if you ever are lucky enough to do one of those, and I really encourage you if you're interested in making games, to go ahead and do a game jam. Which is just it's a kind of a tournament that we do over the weekend where we kind of highlight people who can make a game within a couple days. Like 2 days, you know, a group of people get together, they make a game, right? Like we kind of had almost like a little, like a hackathon, that's right. And they kind of get together and they do their thing, and then they come up with something, right? So I think a good game design document is you're on your way to kind of producing PowerPoints, right? I mean, you can just clip some of these things out and show what your game is looking like, and in a couple slides, like 30 seconds, you can talk about your game and then demo it, right? So that's my recommendation. I recommend putting something to that level together. Now, hey, does this take like 2 seconds to put together? Absolutely not. It's going to take you an hour just for the game design document if you want to get full marks, right? If you spend 10 minutes on the game design document because you want to just hand it in, you won't get full marks because there's a lot of pieces that you need to put together to get it, right? Not because you can't do it in 10 minutes, but because it's hard, right? There's little pieces to it to put it all together. So if you did, for assignment number 1, if you handed in something like the first one, right, then you're going to get lower marks, right, because there's missing stuff. If you're going to put something like the second one in, you're probably going to get close to, 100% for the external document piece, right? I'm just saying. Okay, so that's kind of external document. I wanted to show that because people were confused and they've sent me some emails saying, Tom, I've never done an external document before. What do I do? So please follow the examples. If I go back here to this thing, when it tells you what to include in the external document, which is your game design document, really, just include these things. What if I don't want to? Some people have said, what if I don't want to use your template? Do I have to use your template? No, you don't have to use my template. I want these things in your external document, right? I want it in PDF format or Word, Word format is fine. One of the two. It doesn't have to be in, but don't give it to me in PowerPoint format because your document is not a PowerPoint slide, right? Your document is a Word or PDF so that I can take it and I can look at it in one blow. And your document should also include, which one thing that Jay's didn't include is links to your GitHub, links to your, to your files where they are, where you got your stuff from. If you got assets from somewhere, where did you get them from? Did you get them from the asset store, right? Kind of indicate where you got your stuff from because you should give credit to people who've done the work for you, right? Even if a friend of yours did the graphics because they work at, they go to school at Centennial Story Arts Center or whatever, and you have good friends there, or some kind of freelance artist that they want to lend you some of their stuff to use for your game, that's fine, right? But give them credit. All right, any questions around assignment 2 and when it's due? So again, February 26th. This is a little bit more challenging than the first one. The first one was an intro into 2D, right? You had a background scrolling. There's some really good things we did with the first one, right? Some really good things. And one thing I want to kind of highlight before we go on is to show you what the changes we made, just before we move on into the extra stuff we're going to do today. So I'm going to go into Unity. And let's go into that mail pilot we were working on just last week, just to kind of, I want to tidy up all the loose ends, right? Because there's some loose ends here we didn't kind of get to that are going to help you with the next one. So remember where we left off, we had this restart button, and there were some changes that we had to make in our code. And I kind of highlighted this in a video, but just to say, if you take a look at that game controller, right, this is where all the changes were made, right? So notice how one person asked, hey, do I need to make this serialized field? What did I do this for? How come I made this serialized field? Do I need it? Not really. I could have made this public, right? I did it because if you want to use a private variable for whatever reason, because sometimes you might run into a little block and you're like, God, I don't want to make this public, but I want to see it in the inspector. How do I do that? This is the way to do it. And that's why I did this, not because you need to. And most likely, you won't have to do this. So if you included this in your code, by the way, I've looked at some of your stuff, right? And I've seen this exact code, right? It's in your code, right? Which doesn't make any sense to me. It was an example, people, right? It was like, hey, this is a way to serialize a field that's private. You don't have to do it, right? It's not required. We did our getters and setters. That was one thing we did, right? And we kind of did all this stuff here. We kind of created these public instance variables, and I'm going to try and do it a little differently this time around, where we don't just drag and drop. I want to reference a script, from the script itself. How do I do that, right? And how do I reference game objects from the script? Well, it's not that difficult to do, and we'll talk about that. Okay, so one of the things I changed was in the video, I changed all these, the ones that says enabled to gameObject.setActive, right? And that was our friend here. He came up with the answer to that one, right? He said, hey, professor, if you just change it from enabled, right away to go back to the game object and then go set active false, then that's how it'll work. And that's how I fixed my button problem, right? Again, I would have figured it out eventually because there's probably an example online for that to that effect, right? But he was kind enough to provide that for us. All right, end game. Notice one thing that we did here in the end game was when we played the sound, we did the restart button, and then at the end we have this scene manager. So for those people who didn't watch the addendum, the scene manager.load scene is right here. In order for me to access the scene manager, I have to use another using statement to include the scene management namespace in order for me to do that. right? So this Unity engine scene management is I need to include that. Then down here, I can do something like scene manager.load scene, and then I can get the active scene, and then I can use the name property to kind of load the scene up again. All right, so that's how I did it. It's the exact same way we did application.load level, except we're using a different method. And that's what happens when you upgrade early, right? You upgrade 5.3, 5.31, and now 5.3 includes this requirement, right? And last time, if you look at the examples online, it all says application.load level, right? But they don't work anymore. They're deprecated. Well, they work, but they're deprecated, right? So don't use stuff that's deprecated if you don't have to. Questions around this game controller stuff? Just to kind of, I just wanted to patch it up because I know people have. If you haven't had a chance to watch video number 5 from last week, that's where I detail all this stuff, right? So I'm not going to go into it right now because it's on the video. All right, so game pilot, our game mail pilot was the one we used, and it was a very simple example. Could I have taken this thing further with you guys? Absolutely. What about, you know, animation for my little plane, right? I could have done that. I could have made animations. I could have made animated explosions, all kinds of stuff. We haven't had a chance to cover that though because of the time frame. I wanted you to pump out, you know, your assignment number 1 and then go into assignment number 2. So we're going to cover all this stuff in assignment 2. So in order for us to do assignment 2, we need a couple of things. We need some assets, right? We're going to make an asset. Oh, I know it's scary. We're going to make an asset. We're going to make a sprite, right? Today, we're going to do that. It's going to be really scary, right? But we're going to do it. And we're also going to use some assets that I've included up online. So if you join me online, please. If I go to github.com and I go to Centennial, there is a section that I have here. If I go 2D, if I just type in 2D in there, and there's this thing that says 2D platformer. By the way, I have a 2D platformer demo from last semester. You can also look at. I'm going to do mine differently this semester, but there's some stuff left over. If you ever have a chance to watch the videos ahead of time and so on, you can watch and see what I've done there. But if you go to the 2D platformer assets, that's the one I want to kind of do. This is the actual this 2D platformer right here. If you look at it, I just wanted to let you to see this, right? And you have sprites and everything else. This is all the stuff we have from the simple platformer video, the tutorial. I actually have all the assets from that here. Okay, so that's where the 2D platformer is, right? So that's, you can look to that if you want to compare what we're going to be doing or you do on the video with the stuff you see here. So that's one. But I actually have, if I go to platformer, if I still type platform, right? If I do platform, notice there's one called platformer assets, right? So go to platformer assets for me, and I want you to download these assets where you have sounds, a few sounds. We have some sprites here as well, and we're going to talk about these sprites in a bit, right? So some sounds and some sprites, and I want you to grab this stuff and download it and include it into your project. So go ahead and do that right now, please. So again, it's under Centennial College Platformer Assets. All right, platformer assets up on GitHub. By the way, if you want to make it easy for yourself and you always want to have access to these ones, you can always just fork me on GitHub. Click the fork button in your account. It'll take this and make a copy of it so that it belongs to you. So you can download and install platformer assets. And you can do that with any GitHub. I'm going to make a new. I'm going to make a new project here. So I'm going to go into Unity, and I'm going to go New Project, and it's going to pull up this thing. And notice that there's again choices between 3D and 2D. In Unity 5, again, there's tons of assets we can use and load in a bunch of different kinds of assets. Again, I'm going to ask you not to load any of these ones, right? Because we can always load them in later on. I'm going to click on 2D, of course. And under the new Unity project, it's going to be called COMP305, and it's Winter 2016. That's what I'm going to call it. And we're going to be talking about the platformer demo. So, platformer demo, that's what it's going to be. Notice that it's not a name like MailPilot, because for me to produce something like MailPilot with our platformer demo, we're going to run out of time quick. It's a little bit more challenging to make our platformer than it was to make our other stuff. Okay, I'm going to click Create Project. just to keep up with you guys, and so that way you can see everything that I see, right? I'm going to close my Unity project just for a second. Quit Unity, right? And what I'm going to do is I'm going to set up my GitHub repository, and I recommend you do this kind of stuff from a workflow perspective. So if I go back to Centennial College here and I click plus new repository, and I say COMP305 with the winter 2016, and it's going to be platformer demo. That's what the actual project name is going to be called up online. I create a space for it, and now what I want to do is I want to connect my my terminal to that. So I'm going to go CD, and I know it's under Unity projects on the desktop. So desktop, Unity projects, and then it's COMP305, and then it's winter 2016, and then platformer demo. There it is. I'm going to say git init, and I'll say git add dot, right, which adds everything, and then git commit -m for message initial commit, which basically adds everything to my in the background in my hidden Git folder where I keep track of my project. Okay, now I'm going to just grab these last 2 lines here really quickly. Copy these 2 lines, go back into terminal. Let's clear the terminal so you can see this. If clear for Mac is clear, and clear for Windows is CLS, like we said before. Paste and enter, and now it's going to kind of put up everything else to GitHub. So you see a version of it up here. You can see if you follow me, this is where it's going to be for the videos that we're going to be doing from now until next week, or the week we come back. When we come back, I'll do more videos, right? Because you're going to still have stuff to learn, right? Okay, so this is cool, but you know what? I really like a README to tell me what this thing is all about. So I'm going to kind of put it up online, and here's my README. So I'm going to say COMP305, or well, I'll just write this 2D platformer demo for winter 2016, COMP305 at Centennial. There we go. So we got that space for you there, right? I'm going to click create commit new file. Now, here's a question. I just made a commit, a README file. I got 2 commits up online, right? So there's 2 commits. How many commits do I have back in my local folder? 1. So am I in sync? No. What do I need to do to get in sync? Pull. So I got to go back here just to be sure and do git pull. When I do git pull, it takes that extra file and downloads it into my project. You won't see this in Unity. It'll be outside of Unity because Unity only looks at the assets folder when you open it up, right? So let's open up Unity again. Remember, whenever you want to do Git with Unity, highly recommend, because it doesn't lock anything, that you close Unity down in order for you to do Git. One day they might incorporate Git or something like something that we use, Git, in Unity. Right now they do not. They have other things they include, and it's only for the pro version, right? I'll show you that in a second. So go back into Unity, right? And okay, let's take a look. So where's my, where do I get my, you know, if I was going to go file, right, or edit, if I go to project settings, right, as an example, here's my project settings. And do I see input, tags and layers, player, physics, quality, graphics, network, editor, you know, that kind of stuff, right? Here's all my projects. So here's my input manager. That's my input manager, how we did this last time to get control over the character. That's something that we're going to have to work on this time around, eh? Because our character is going to move when we press our keys a little differently than what we did last time, right? So that's one of the stuff we're going to work on. We're going to use physics this time around, right? Which makes it just that much more difficult because last time we used just movement around. We changed positions of our object. All we did was when we changed positions, where we just changed the position of the actual object to the next. You know, when we press the button, it moves it to that next level, 5 pixels or whatever. So we can't do that like this time. We got to apply forces to make our character move around, right? And why is that? Because if I move it, then I'm not using physics, and then that's what this platformer thing is all about, right? Using physics to push things around. Apply force, in other words. Okay. So that's one. Let's keep looking at this at our. If I go to edit and I go to project settings for a second, I got to show you this so that you understand. Tags and layers. What are those? So those are all the tags and layers we have for our game. And notice that our tags right now, there's no empty tags. We're going to create a tag for our enemies and so on, our platformers, all this tag. Same thing with layers. we're going to create a ground layer and all that kind of stuff we can create. Again, this is under edit. There's audio, right? Here's our audio, and it talks about global volume for audio and so on, other things here. I'm not going to go into that yet. I'm just going to show you this stuff. Time, right? So fixed timestamp and maximum time allowed, and time scales 1. You can change this so the time manager works a little differently. I'm not going to go into this too much, just showing you the stuff again. And let's keep going. Player, right? So here's our company name. Here's our player settings, our default company. Hey, this is different. What's this? Our product name. When I do a build, if I'm going to build this game so it runs standalone, and by the way, one day I will ask you to upload your standalone version of your game so I don't have to build it, right? We're going to talk about that because it's going to become too big for you to give it to me on eCentennial. It's going to happen. Your game is going to be like hundreds of megs, right? Very soon, very quickly, because you're going to add assets to your game. And then I'm going to ask you to do a build. And one of this screen here, this edit player settings, actually it says things. What's my default company name? What's my product name? Obviously, COMP305 Winter 2016 platformer demo wouldn't be a great name for a product, right? You have to kind of create a name for your game and so on. And different platforms, right? This is like for iOS, and this is for Apple TV. There's other ones, right, that they have. Here's Android settings, and here's for Tizen, and then here's for WebGL if you're going to do things for the web. And again, WebGL kind of puts a wrapper around your game. And this one here is for Samsung TV, and they're going to have a bunch of other ones as we go. Like, for example, here's the resolution for our presentation. You can choose our resolution, and I recommend that you match this one up with what your game is going to be. So we're going to make a game that's 640 by 480. So let's change that right now. So we'll say our screen width is 640, and our default height is 480, right? So when we build, it's going to be 640 by 480. All right, I'm not going to choose icons or anything like that right now. And I'm going to click this little down arrow here under player settings. And that's going to just be this is our regular default player, which is settings for PC, Mac, and Linux standalone. All right. By the way, if you haven't downloaded the full package for Unity and you only downloaded stuff like for a PC build, then you can't build things for Mac, right? You can only build things for PC, like an exe. And if you don't download stuff for PC, then if you have a Mac, you can only build things for Mac. So be careful when you download and install Unity. This is one of the things you can download and install. Different settings for these things. Hey, notice there's some stuff missing here. What about Xbox or PS4 or one of those? You can get those builds as well, but that's something that you have to work with. It doesn't have to be professional. Even this version can get them, but you have to connect with PlayStation or the Sony network and Sony and Microsoft to get permissions to get a build for those, right? And it takes a little bit of time. You have to kind of, put together a game design document, hint, right? And do a proposal of what your game is going to look like, that you want to create something for the Xbox console or PS4 or others. There's other kinds of options you can have here as well, right? All right, let's continue. So project settings again, and we're going to go down to physics. Notice that there's physics. Here's physics. And this is for 3D physics. When you ever see physics in the game, it's for 3D. If I want to look at edit and I go players project settings, physics 2D, we're going to have to modify some of this. Notice, and I want you to kind of figure this out. Take a look at this on the side here. Our gravity goes from 0 on the x-axis. By the way, you can make gravity on the x-axis too if you want, right? So the player naturally goes in a certain direction, because you can make a game that kind of goes on the side of the game. So instead of you having a game that's portrait, you can make it so that it's landscape, so that your game works this way, right? Like in a mobile device, right? So in that particular case, you want to have your gravity on the x-axis, not on the y-axis. Or you could do it on both axes. But for now, what's this 9.81, minus 9.81? What does that stand for? Remember we talked, what's the units in Unity? Anybody remember? Meters. This is the acceleration due to gravity, 9.8 meters per second squared, right? So that's trying to simulate true gravity in Earth. Guys and girls, that is not effective for gameplay. You're gonna have to change this value to something larger. Let's leave it right now. I'm just pointing it out so you can see this. Because 9.8 meters per second is great if you're gonna do a physics simulation, not great if you wanna have a jumping guy that comes down. If you use 9.8, your guys will tend to float, even if we don't use pixel perfect collisions For pixel perfect collisions, this is going to change even more, right? It's going to be something like 100, right? Because our scale is going to be out of whack, right? Because we're doing pixel perfect collisions, right? Pixel perfect, as opposed to, you know, kind of a aspect ratio, kind of a game with aspect ratio. Pixel perfect is easier for us as beginners because it allows us control of where everything is, right? And it's less confusion. If we went to the kind of like open aspect ratio, then your physics were great, but how it looks on the game screen would look totally different. So be aware of that. And also your sprites would be affected as well. Okay, so just noticing some of these. One of the things that you're going to see a lot of is down here, we're going to have to modify this minimum penetration for penalty. Okay, this minimum penetration for penalty, right? It basically says the minimum contact penetration radius allowed before any separation impulse force is applied. Woo! What does that mean? And extreme caution should be used when modifying this value, as making this smaller means that the polygons will have insufficient buffer for continuous collision, and making it larger may create artifacts for vertex collision. So in other words, don't mess with this, is what it's saying, right? But what it's really saying is this. Sometimes when we put our collisions in place, you'll have a character, he'll be at the top of the screen, and he'll have a platformer, and he'll fall so fast, he'll just drop into the platform like this for 1 second, and kind of go and stop here. If you care, if you want him to stop right on top of the platform, you modify this value, but be very careful. You'll stop it, but then what happens is sometimes you'll bounce off too, right? So be careful how that works. And that's what this little value is. So physics 2D settings, I don't recommend you change. It talks about linear tolerance and, you know, and some math that they use for physics here to simulate the, you know, the falling of objects and motion of objects. Okay, let's keep going. So that's physics 2D. Quality, here's quality. Notice that you can change the quality level depending on your rendering for pixel light count and so on, and shadows. And there's also something, there's a bit of level of detail that you can modify here in the game, so that way you can adjust the performance of the game when there's a lot of objects and when the game is very, very challenging. Notice that the level of quality by default is fantastic, which means like you have everything on, everything is turned on, right? And for most times, this will be fine, but there might be some times where you go in here and change your level of quality to make it something else. For example, on a different kind of device. All right. Graphics, right? Graphics, again, it talks about built-in shader settings and so on. I would leave this alone for now. And these are, I'm not going to keep on going to the other ones. Editor, let's skip network for a second. Let's go to editor for a second. Editor. And then notice that Unity remote, my device, none, any Android device. My compression, JPEG, I can use different kinds of compression. Resolution normal, I can go downsize resolution if I want to. Again, this is just for my editor settings and how it's going to look. My sprite packer, always enabled. I can enable for certain builds and so on. So some other settings here that you can set up for your editor. Again, for the most part, I recommend don't change. However, one thing you will change, if you were going to move this game from a 2D to a 3D setting, and let's say you pick the wrong setting, and this is what I want to show you. Notice how 2D is clicked on right here, right? So if I click on 3D, right, notice my mode is still 2D, right, in my editor settings, right? But that means the camera is going to be different and some other things are going to be starting off different. I recommend, again, you look at it from a 2D perspective in the scene, and if you made a mistake and somehow pressed 2D and you started working and now you want to do a 3D game, change it here too, right? Because the mode will make a difference in terms of the way physics work and other things, all right? So be careful about that. If you don't know how to do that. Again, that's on our projects editor. Okay, script execution order is the last one. Notice that you can choose to run scripts in a certain order, right? And this is great if you're going to build your game or compile your game with certain scripts that you want to run first before other ones. An example of that would be a bunch of classes that you want to compile first so that the classes are available in other places of your code. Then you could specify a script order if you want here. Okay, so that's really your editor in a nutshell. I wanted to show you that because some people will never see that project settings area here, and it's important for you to know where it is. File. If I go to File again, let's go to Build Settings. File, Build Settings, right, before we get into it. So here's Build Settings. Notice how I have a different web players that I can choose. I can target different. Here's Xbox One. Look. Well, look, I don't have a module loader for Xbox One. I need to go to Module Manager. And if I go to Module Manager, I don't have the ability for me to, if I refresh my modules, by the way, there's a way to install a module for Xbox One, which I don't have right now. Give me an example. It's there. I mean, I can build a game for Xbox One. I can make it for Xbox One. I won't be able to modify my game, and I can't use it until I do that. And again, there's some objects here that I have to get from Microsoft for me to make it work. Same thing with BlackBerry, right? So some stuff you can do right away. All this stuff from PC, web player, all the way down to here. Notice that web player, this is new, right? We didn't have a web player last version, right? We had WebGL. That's all we had. Web player, if you actually click web player, this is something that it does create a wrapper, again, for your game. And notice it says, please note that the Unity web player is deprecated. Building for web player will no longer be supported in future versions of Unity, right? That's why they've included it here, but they don't recommend you use it, right? They recommend you use WebGL because this is the way that they want to deploy their web builds. So if you want to make a game for the web and you want to make it work and you want to put it up on Azure or something like that, you could certainly do that, right? But it would be a wrapper. It would be a wrapper around your game, and it wouldn't work in Chrome. Chrome does not support playing a Unity game in the web, FYI. Chrome uses the security settings in Chrome prevent you from doing that. But it would work in Safari, and if you wanted to test it out if you wanted to use this as a way of prototyping so you can show it to other people, example in a game jam, so everyone can try the game out instead of downloading your Unity project, then you would deploy it to web, put it up on Azure somewhere, and tell them to use Safari or some other kind of browser, and it would work, right? So that's what you would do here. So builds is important. One of the things I didn't talk about last time was this idea of adding scenes to your build, right? And this is what we're going to do right now. So this is the first thing we're going to do. So we've got some assets folder, right? And I told you to download. By now I've been talking, so you've already should have downloaded your assets, right? If I want to incorporate my assets or import my assets, there's a few ways I can import assets like I talked about before. What are the three easy ways that I can use to import assets? 3 ways. Drag and drop. I can also do, that's inside Unity, right? I can also drag and drop in the operating system. That's another way I can do it. And then what's the third way? If I go to assets, if I right click, I can go import assets, the import new asset, and I can do it here too. So there's 3 ways you can get assets, right, from outside of Unity. Let's do the drag and drop way. So I already have this stuff. I have it on my desktop in a COMP305 folder. I have something called my platformer assets. Here they are, right? And I want to grab my sounds and my sprites. Here's my sounds and my sprites. And I want to drag them into my assets folder, right? So over here on the side. Yay, it's going to do its dance. It's going to convert everything. And then now I have my sounds and my sprites in its own little folder. Let's add a couple more scripts for us for our little demo, right? So I'm going to right click. I'm going to create a new folder. And it's going to be called scenes with an underscore and a capital S. I'm going to do another folder called scripts. So those are the 2 that I'm going to use, scenes and scripts. And let's save our scene right away. So I'm going to say file, save scene. And we're going to save it as our main scene, again, under assets. And if you look at where it's supposed to go, right? If I expand this, I want it to go into my scenes folder. Again, it doesn't really matter. You can move it later, right? But so now if I look at my scenes folder, it has my main scene, right? Okay, let's go back to build settings now. For my build settings, if I go to File, Build Settings, I want to add my scene in here. And again, there's a couple ways to do that. I can click Add Open Scenes, or I can drag and drop. Let's drag and drop my scene into my build settings. Notice that it has the name of the scene and then the index number 0. This is the order the scenes will show up for the player, right? So if I have my main scene, let's say my main scene was a menu scene, this is where it would appear here, all right? It's important to put this in if I want to reload my scene too, right? To show main here. This is where you do it in build. Okay, cool. So that's one thing I did. How about if I want to build my game? And I'm going to ask you to do that stuff. Well, we don't have anything here, so let's do that. Put a couple things in place, take a short break, and then we'll come back and build it, right? All right, let's take a look at the stuff I've given you for sprites. Under the sprites folder, there's other folders. Let's take a look at those folders. I have one called tiles, right? But tiles is actually a big tile map like this. Take a look. Okay. I also have other tile maps. I've given you a couple of them, blocks 1 and blocks 2. So to kind of produce a little tile map for you, right? There's also this other one, free 2D game tiles, right? Another tile map that I've gotten. It's a little bit simpler. So go to the third one, this one down here, right? This little one down here. Okay, notice on the right, my sprite. Before I have anything in the scene, I'm modifying my sprites here. Notice on the right here, it says texture type, sprite, sprite mode, single. We've only been using single before. Let's change this to multiple. Yay, we've got multiple sprites now, right? Okay, cool. Our pixels per unit, leave as is for right now. Let's go back into sprite editor. Take a look at our sprite editor over here, right? Packing tag is important too. We'll talk about that in a second. Like, you know, for example, if I say default tiles, let's change that packing tag to default just for a second. I'll show you that. If I go to sprite editor, right? It says unapplied import settings. Unapplied import settings for asset sprites, tiles, free 2D game tiles. Apply and continue. Let's apply. Okay, here's my sprite editor now. And Unity is pretty intuitive, right? I want to slice this up. How many tiles do you see here? And think about each of these pictures as a tile. Right now, it's one big image. How many? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13, 14, 15. All right? You don't have it broken up yet, but it's one tile that I can break up into 3 spots, or I can make it one tile like you're suggesting, right? How do I do that? On the left, top left corner, there's an option for slice. And notice that it says automatic, right? Automatic. If I click slice, it's going to try and slice everything in one big one. That's no good, right? How about we try it again? So instead of automatic, we do grid by cell count, right? Grid by cell count. How many tiles do I have down? So I have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 tiles down, and 1, 2, 3 tiles across, right? So here we go. So columns, I have 3 columns, right? And I have 5 rows. Oops, 5 rows. And I want to, my pivot, notice my pivot is center. I can change my pivots to wherever I want them for my tiles. For now, this is okay. And press slice. So Unity does a pretty good job of slicing up your tiles. Not bad. Here's the problem. Look at the white spaces in between the tiles. Notice there's a little bit of white spaces here. Those white spaces, right, unfortunately for us, they're not transparent. This is not a transparent tile sheet. Right? So what you're going to get when you make this little block is this little white area here on the corners. Unless your background is white, this is going to look pretty darn ugly, right? So how do I fix this? Well, for now, let's just use it as is and click slice, right? All right, now we want to apply the changes up here on the top right. There's apply. So click apply. What it's going to do when you go back to Unity, right, is going to look like this. Here's my free 2D game stuff or whatever. Take a look over here. This is what I'm getting. This is what you should have too. You have something different than me. If you do, something you've done wrong, right? Well, this is not really descriptive, right? And they're really freaking long, right? Look at this. So I've got like free 2D tile game, and then even though I said my parking tag is default, as an example, I've got all these different tiles, and you know, there's 1, 2, 3, you know, a bunch of different ones here as an example. And they really don't mean anything descriptive. And maybe what you want to do is use tile 1, tile 2, rename them. And you can do that. And where do you do that? So I'm going to go back to the main one. So it's almost like a folder. And underneath the folder, you see a bunch of these sprites. These are the slices in my sprite sheet. So this is the sprite sheet, the first level name here, up here. And these are my slices. So the easiest way to do it, to make it easy, is change this name here at the top to something else, right? So let's try that out. So we're going to kind of go in there and change this out to, you know, tile map or tile map, right? So I've changed the name to my sprite. This is actually my sprite sheet itself. It's changed to tile map, right? Let's go back to sprite editor, right? Notice how on the bottom right here, right? On the bottom right, each of the tiles has a name. Look, so here's all the tiles are split up, and on the bottom here, this little panel on the bottom right, here's the name of the tile. So if I was a little bit more careful, I would have noticed that this says tile 1, 0, right? This one should be tile 1, 1, and so on. And this is tile 1, 2. So I could have done it so that if I changed my name first and came in here, I would have had everything perfect. Let's fix that. How do I fix that? Right? Because I want to fix this tile map because it's messed up, right? What if I change this back? So from multiple, what if I change this back to single, right? And let's kill the default and click apply. What does it do? Well, it brings it back down to tile map again. Here's tile map, one big tile map. And now what I want to do is I want to change it back to multiple, right? So I just want to show you this over and over again so you see it. So it's all the control in your sprite is over here on the right. So single, multiple. Hey, there's no more multiple maps. What happened? Well, my sprite, all my slices, the slice information is gone. It's just information. It's like a meta file that happens in the background that tells Unity how to use my sprites in my sprite sheet, right? So let's go in there and change that back. So I'm going to go sprite editor. Now that it's called tile map, right? It's a little bit nicer than, you know, that other long name. And I go sprite editor, apply. Now I'm going to do the same thing. Notice that everything is back to normal. Here are all my slices again. That's not what I wanted. How come? Right? How come my slices are all in here and how come they're all the way there? Well, what if I wanted to delete them all? So I highlight everything and I press delete. Can I do that? Can I wipe away all my sprite sheets? Or can I delete individual ones, right? Can I do that? Can I even wipe away one if I wanted to? Like how do I change this so that each of these tile sheets are these tiles are gone, right? Anybody have an idea? So shift delete doesn't work, right? Alt D doesn't work. How about edit? And if you notice delete, right? There's an alt backspace, right? For you guys on the PC would be alt backspace. For me, it's command backspace, right? Or command delete. I don't have a backspace on my keyboard right now, so that's a problem, right? So I'm just going to use my delete function. So you can delete all of them if I want by just highlighting it all and go assets. And no, not assets. If I go here, so I've highlighted everything. If I click delete, right? What happens is it's going to get me to delete the whole map, and I don't want that. I want to just delete individual tiles. If I go back to edit, delete, that's what I want. So see if there's an edit option for everything. So highlight everything, edit, delete. And now it's going to wipe out my tiles. Oh, so you think, but they're all back again. How come? Just saying. Showing you this so you see for the first. So edit, delete. If I edit, delete each individual one, they're back, right? What? Oh, wait. No, it's not. Look, my tile map 1 is there. Let's try again. Edit, delete. Edit, delete. Edit, delete. I'm showing you how to fix stuff, right, guys? Because you're going to go and mess up like I just did, right? And then you're going to have, hey, Tom, how do I fix the sprite sheet up? And what is a sprite sheet anyway? So what's a sprite sheet in your own words? Albert, what's a sprite sheet in your own words? What's a sprite sheet? If you're going to guess. So you have one big image, right, that has different images on, one big image file that has different image objects on it, right? And each image object, right, can be accessed by some kind of JSON data, XML map or something that Unity uses in the background to kind of create this map. Okay, so there's tile map 1. Look, there's tile map 0. I still got tile map 1. We'll go back here. There's tile map 1. How do I get rid of that? Edit, delete. There's a big tile map right now. So there's tile map 0. I want to slice it up again. So slice. And I want to go by grid and by count. Notice that it starts tile maps. It's a little bit more handy. The names are a little bit shorter. So if you change the name of the sprite, the actual big sprite sheet first, then all the subnames of all the tiles in the sprite sheet change according to the sprite sheet name. Or you can also use custom names every single tile if you want to down here by changing the name of the tile. It's handy so you know what they are. Okay, let's slice it up first. So I'm going to go slice. Again, I'm using by cell, grid by cell count, and I go 3 by 5, and I press slice. Cool. Now I look at this, and let's say I want to make this something different, or this one here is just a gray tile, right? So I could say gray tile 1 if I wanted to down here. I just rename it, right? I'm not going to do that. Just keep it easy and click apply. Okay, cool. Now let's go back into Unity proper. Notice that there's a bunch of tiles from tile 0 to tile 1 and so on, right? Those are all the tiles that I can use for my game. And this is where I can make my platforms out of. I do have a problem though, however. Notice that my pixels per unit now sits at 100, which means it's 100 to 1 ratio. And what did we do last time to make it pixel perfect? Do you remember? Change this to 1. I caution you, once we go down this road, ladies and gentlemen, we can't go back, right? Once we go pixel perfect, Our regular stuff, you might see some Unity examples online where they do physics, and you're like, hey, it was way easier for the people online than Tom's showing us in class. Yes, because what we're showing you in class is pixel perfect, and the stuff they're doing online, it doesn't use pixel perfect collisions. It uses something else, right? Here's an example of that. Let's not do pixel perfect for a second. If you did it, revert. Just go back and put 100 in there, all right? So here's my camera, right? My camera right now, if I look at my game is set to 640 by 480, right? Okay, so notice on the bottom left-hand corner, I'm gonna drop in a tile. I'm just gonna take tile 0, which is, or maybe we'll take tile number 14, tile map 14. If you follow my example, the last one here, which looks like some kind of crate, right? And I'm gonna drag and drop it into my scene like this. Okay, notice that it drags and drops into my scene, and it's proportional. It's 100 to 1, okay? So let's try this out. So if I was to move this down to the bottom of my screen here, right? So here's the bottom left of my screen. There it is, right? So there's my tile. It's on the bottom left of my screen. Let's see what it looks like in game. Yay, it's up at the bottom left of my screen. And that's great. But the problem is, what happens when I go to a larger aspect? Like if I go to free aspect, right? Where to go? How about if I change aspects again? If I go to 5 by 4, well, it's here, but half of it's cut off, right? And I can make this bigger. It's also the size of my screen, but notice how it's cut off, right? That's bad. And how about everything else? If I go back to 16 by 10, right? Well, it's not in the corner anymore, right? How about the scene? What does the scene look like? The scene also moves, depending on your aspect, it moves my tile around. Do I want that to happen? Not really, right? So you have to choose an aspect. If I was gonna do an aspect that's 16 by 10 or 16 by 9, and if I worked in that aspect, then I wouldn't have to choose pixel perfect, and your physics would work perfectly for you. I'm giving you options. I'm not telling you to make a pixel perfect game. Your assignment number 2 doesn't say make a pixel perfect 2D platformer, because there's some stuff around that, some changes we're gonna have to make it work, right? So I'm telling you what it is. You could use this, but whatever you do, stick to it. Whatever the resolution or aspect ratio, your camera's gonna change to align to that. Let's go back to my game for a second and change it back to 640 by 480. Just keep it the same. There it is. Okay, cool. Well, this is good, right? And I can certainly act like this, and physics will work just great on this object now, right? But you may have some weird effects, right? And I want to make my game pixel perfect because my nudges and everything else, you know, is a little bit more challenging the other way, right? Okay, so what do? Go back to my little tile map here. All my tiles, all my sprites inside my sprite sheet here, my tile map, are all going to be 1 to 1. So I'm going to change this to 1. I'm going to go back from filter mode from bilinear to point, like we did before, right? And I'm going to click apply. And then it's massive, right? What happened? It's huge. You're like, I don't know why, Tom, but I have this big tile. Well, it's just massive, right? Why? Because if I look at my camera is my size is 5, which is really small. I need to make my camera at least half the height of my screen. My screen is 480 pixels because it's pixel perfect. I need to make my camera 240 pixels high, right? So that's what I'm gonna do. So 240. And when I do that for my camera and press enter, right? If I scroll out now, there's my camera, right? Oh man, what happened to my tile? My tile is pixel perfect, right? So if I click on my tile map, number 14, and if I go to my tile itself, it says in the bottom here what size it is. If I go to file number 14, I look at the preview here, my tile is 196 by 196. It's massive, right? It's huge. It's half my screen, right? Remember, we're going pixel perfect. So I want to make my tile 64 by 64, right? What's the ratio that I have to drop a 196 by 196 to make it 64 by 64? Right now, its scale is 1. I got to drop it down to less than 1. What's the number? Can someone figure that out for me? It's a ratio. I want to multiply something. Math, right? Here's math. Multiply something by 196 to get to 64, right? So 64x is equal to 64. Sorry, yeah. Something x times 196 is 64. Let's solve for x. Huh? What is it? 0.3 exactly? Let's see if I do that. 0.25? Come on, guys. You guys. What is it? 0.32. I'm getting numbers. Who agrees with 0.32? Right? 0.32? Come on, guys. Okay, how do I figure that out? Because you figure this out yourself. If you have a weird graphic, I want to make it 64 by 64. which right now it's 196 by 196. How do I do that? So let's pull up my applications for, and I'll pull up my calculator, right? Here's my calculator. So something multiplied by 196 by x is equal to 64. 3.062. That means it's going to make it bigger. It can't be 3.062. Come on, guys. 0.36. I'm getting all these numbers. Who knows the way to do this? Come on, guys. If I divide it by 64, so again, here the number is the formula is x. So x times 64. Let's take x times 196 is equal to 64, right? X times 196 is equal to 64. I'm going to take 196, 64, and divide it by 196, and I'm going to get the answer, what x is, that I multiply, right? So in order for me to do that, guys, so I take 64 and divide it by 196, right? And I get 0.3265306, blah, 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 blah. I have to make it exactly 64, right? What would you do in the game? What would you apply? If this is the number, what would you apply to the game to make it exactly or close to 64 by 64? I like your answer. I like 03265. 03265 is what I want to do. And the reason why is if 3 is really like, it's not enough to make this into 6, right? So if you round down, then 03265 is the one I want to use, okay? I know it's a little bit of math, but hey, we can't avoid math when we do computers. So how do I do that? So I'm going to go back to my tile, which is here. Here's my tile map. Notice that this is an object now, right? And here's my scale. And I put in 0.3625. And notice that my scale is correct for my x-axis. And I'll copy this and put it here. And I might as well copy this and put it here, but it doesn't mean anything in this context. So this is a approximately 64 by 64 pixel width tile. Why am I working with 64 by 64? It's around the right scale. You could break the tiles down smaller units, like 32 by 32 is also classic, right? And you can make your own tile size. My recommendation for when you start off platformers is making something even, like 32 by 32 or 64 by 64. Okay, cool. So I've got my, what looks like a crate, and let's see what it looks like in the game. There's the game, right? It looks like there's a crate on the game, right? I want this crate to fall, right? I want this crate to fall. And to apply physics for the first time, then we'll stop and take a short break. Here's my crate. I want to apply physics. I'm going to add components to it. What components do I add? I need a rigid body 2D. So physics 2D, rigid body 2D. Here's my rigid body 2D, right? Notice how my mass is 1. I don't want to change that up. And my gravity scale for this object is 1. What's my gravity scale again? 9.8 meters per second square. How many meters per pixel? Do you know? The answer is you don't know. You don't know what the meters per pixel are, right? You don't know, right? If it's 9 pixels per meter, right, or 9 meters per pixel, then it would fall fairly quick. It would fall like, it would accelerate, fairly quick. It's not that ratio, okay? I'm just letting you know. So let's play this thing and see what happens. So I play the game, and I check it out. It's just going to fall. This is 9.8 meters per second in the game, in this pixel perfect left. Notice that it accelerates, and it would, because as acceleration due to gravity helps. All right, so that's not really a nice scale. Let's change the gravity scale to 10. Let's see what that does. So scale to 10, and see if that's any better. A little bit better, right? Still, it floats a little bit too much, right? Let's change the gravity scale to 30, right? And you're going to see what that is. This is per object, by the way. And then, okay, that's kind of slow. Still kind of floats, though, doesn't it? Take a look. So imagine if our character jumps up and then falls down kind of slow. Still slow. Let's take that to 100, right? Now you'll see what my challenge is. Remember, when we change gravity scale to 100 for this object, it takes 100 times the force for me to jump with it. It's going to mess up my forces and everything else, right? Let's press play. That's a little better. So it's going to fall pretty good, right? So gravity scale per unit, per object falls. Okay, I wanted to collide with some kind of object here on the bottom, right? And I'm going to do that after the break. We're going to create another object, right? Based on this little tile thing. We can make other objects fix and so on. So let's take a short break, 5 minutes, and come back, and we'll talk about some simple physics.